Welcome, folks, to Rambam. We are learning the laws of Holy Temple, specifically Psuli HaMukdashim, those things that invalidate offerings in the Holy Temple. Chapter 14, with regard to the intent that could disqualify a sacrifice, right? Very important intent. The only intent that is significant is that of the person performing the temple service. The intent of the person bringing the sacrifice is of no consequence. So in other words, the one doing the service is what's important. If it's my offering and I'm bringing it, my intent is not what's important. I'm just bringing it. I'm not doing the service. The kohen is doing the service, right? Or whoever is doing the service, right? Even when we heard that the owner had an intent which would cause the sacrifice to be considered as pigul, in other words, using it not in the appropriate time. Let's say your part of it was to be eaten by you even, but you're going to not eat it, there's a time limitation on the offerings. If it was like a korban shlamim, a peace offering, so it's eaten by the kohanim and the owner. And let's say you were thinking about that you could eat it, like you're going to eat in 3 days from now. You're not going to eat it now, but you can't on that offering, for example. So that would not be a problem because you're not doing the offering. If the person performing the temple service had the proper intent, the sacrifice is acceptable as long as the one who's doing the service has the proper intent. Give me just a moment, folks. Okay. Sorry. All right. So what's important, the person who's doing the temple service. The intent of the person performing sacrificial service is significant only when he is fit to perform this service. He is performing a service that is an entity fit to service, a second point, and he is doing so in a place fit for service. So what's the example? If a person who is unfit for a temple service receives the blood, brings it to the altar, or casts it on the altar, and at that time he is performing the service has an unacceptable intent with regard to the place or time, his intent does not disqualify the sacrifice. Why? Because he's not fit for the temple service. Like, for example, a kohen, right, who is disqualified. Remember, we've learned this, that not every priest is fit for doing the service, right? If he's got some kind of blemish, then the service he can't do. He has other things that he does in the Holy Temple, but not the service. And so if he's disqualified, right? Second, let's see this footnote. Then the fact that he had inappropriate intent doesn't disqualify, right, that sacrifice. Meaning someone else could still take it up and do it, right? Otherwise, what he did is not good. Obviously, it doesn't fulfill the obligation, right? So the blood, so that's right, that he receives the blood, he brings it to the altar, casts it on the altar. and he had wrong intent. So the blood that he received, or the proportion that remained after he cast some on the altar, should be poured into the drainage canal. If the blood of the soul remains within the animal, a person who is fit for performing the temple service should receive it with proper intent. So there's two types of blood, right? There's the blood that is um, the life force, right? Which would be in the veins, I guess, as opposed to that which is in the limbs. So one is more vital, and that's what comes out gushing out first, right? And you know, we salt meat in order to attract more blood to come out, right? So it's deeper down. That's a secondary kind of blood, right? That's not for the soul, so to speak. You know, everything in a certain sense is, but it's called the remaining blood, right? There's a blood of the soul, then the remaining blood. So the blood, if there's left blood of the soul, then someone who is fit should do it with the proper intent, and then just do everything that's proper. Right. And then it's fitting. If, however, the person who is unfit for the temple service has disqualifying intent, at the time he slaughters the animal, he disqualifies it with his intent because the ritual slaughter is acceptable. It be performed by an unfit person, as explained. So, slaughtering of the animal can be done by a regular Israelite. Doesn't have to be done by a Kohen. So this person's not unfit for that. So the fact that he had an unfit thought about it, he makes it unfit, even though he's disqualified from the remainder. There's slaughtering, receiving the blood, taking the blood, and putting the blood on the altar, right? Those are the four main things. Three of them have to be done only by a fit kohen. The first one, slaughtering, doesn't have to be done by a kohen at all. So an unfit kohen for sure could do it. So the fact that he had a wrong, a disqualifying intent disqualifies it, the entirety. He'd be like the Israelite, right? They are sacrifices that are acceptable if they were offered with the intent other than specified originally, as will be explained. Therefore, in those instances, if a kohen who is not fit for the temple service receives the blood, carries it, or casts it on the altar, he disqualifies the sacrifice if he offered it for the desired intent, in which instance it would be disqualified. Whoa. Well, I didn't get that one. I missed something there. Okay, they are sacrifices that are acceptable if they are offered with the intent other than specified. A burnt offering is offered with the intent that it is a peace offering. So chapter 15, next chapter, we're going to learn about that. All right. So therefore, in those instances, the kohen who is not fit for the temple service receives the blood, carries it, casts it on the altar, he discloses the sacrifice as is offered. Having that intent, in which was it would be disqualified. Remember, in these instances, okay. Okay. So that's if he did it with the wrong intent.
That's correct.
But if he did it with the right intent, but he's a disqualified person, then he disqualifies it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how that fit in with the previous line. Okay. Even if the blood of the soul remains and it was received by acceptable priest, kohen, and cast it on the altar, the sacrifice would be disqualified because he had the right intent. We said before that he didn't have the right intent, so he doesn't disqualify it. It's as if he did nothing. But here he did something because he had the right intent. He's just the wrong person because he's disqualified. Okay, yeah. And even if there would be blood left of the soul, right, which is the first blood that comes, then an acceptable person can do it, but he's already disqualified it. It's not disqualified because it's offered a different purpose, but disqualified service was performed by someone unfit for service, as we explained, right? Because he was an unfit person to do the service. He did it correctly. So disqualifies. Okay. So what is meant by the concept that these principles apply only with regard to performing service with an entity fit for service? For example, the handful was taken from the meal offering of the Omer without a proper intent. It is considered as if it was taken with the proper intent. Performing service was an entity fit for service. Taken with the meal offering of the Omer without proper intent. The intent that it be offered as another type of meal offering, not an Omer offering. It is considered as if it was taken with the proper intent and the remnants are eaten. The rationale is that it was offered from barley and barley is not a substitute fit for an other offering. Ah, okay. Omer, if you remember, is brought on the, like Spheris Omer, when we count the Omer, so it's brought on the second day of Passover, right? From the first crop. So if you brought from there, and you had an intent for another meal offering, guess what? You can't contradict what you have. Because every other meal offering is made from wheat. This is barley. So an intent cannot contradict the fact. The intent has to be congruent with the fact. Right? Right. So wheat, you can have many different types of offerings, of meal offerings. Barley, you only have one. So if you have the improper intent, it's not congruent because you were thinking about a wheat offering. Well, this is not a wheat offering, it's a barley offering. So your incongruent intent doesn't disqualify. Interesting point over here. Intent has to match the act, not the act of the intent, not the other way around, right? So if this is wheat and I had the wrong meal offering, well, then my intent is not matching, right? But here my intent is it cannot be incongruent of the fact that this is barley. And there's only one kind of barley offering. So I can't, if I'm thinking wheat offering of another kind, that intent is meaningless. In other words, it's not disqualifying it because it's not aligned with the fact. You have to, the fact that it's a barley offering. Very interesting. Similarly, if one had disqualifying intent with regard to a meal offering of envy, the term a woman who's suspected of adultery, right? Right, a saita, while frankincense was on it, before the frankincense was removed, they're not allowed to have frankincense on it, but there's frankincense. Hers cannot have frankincense, right? So this is a meal offering of envy. Once I had intent to regard the meal offering. So here, what happened over here? This is a adulterous woman, soita, right? So it's a meal offering of envy, but there's frankincense on it. But it was mistakenly put there. You're not allowed to. It's not allowed to be with frankincense. It was removed. You had an intent that it was a different kind of offering, not a meal offering of envy, right? It doesn't matter. Why? Because there's only one kind of meal offering that doesn't have frankincense. That's this one of envy. So the fact that you had something else of an intent is of no consequence because it doesn't fit the fact. The fact here that this is the one without frankincense. Okay, that's a little complicated. Number 4, what is meant by the concept that these principles apply only with regard to the performing service in a place fit for service? With regard to performing service in a place fit for service. When the altar became damaged and the priest offered sacrifice had a disqualifying intent with regard to the time or place, right? Time is disqualifying that I could eat the sacrifice in the wrong time, or I could eat it if this could only be eaten, let's say in the walls of in the Azara, because they're the most sanctified kind of offering, like a sin offering, right? You had the wrong where you could eat it. They eat it outside of the Azara, so that's disqualifying. But there's a problem over here. What's the problem? He does not disqualify the sacrifice with this sin because the place was not fit for the temple service at the time. The Torah tells us you cannot perform on an altar that is not fit for service, meaning there was a damaged stone. It needs to be fixed first, then you can serve. But what if you did and you had the wrong intent? It doesn't matter. Your intent doesn't matter. Again, why? Because now it's not about the fact of the so what I'm looking for of the offering. Now it's where the offering is being offered, the altar. The place of it has to be fitting also. So your intent is only as good as the qualification of the offering itself, that it itself is not disqualified, and where the place where you're offering it, which is the altar. The altar is now disqualified because there's a stone that may be a jar or something, and until it's fixed, you're not allowed to offer. You did offer and you had disqualifying intent, doesn't disqualify the offering. Meaning, if it was a small little thing and they plastered it right away, and someone else now came and did that offering properly with the proper intent, right? If there's a possibility of doing that, then the offering would be acceptable. But again, it's irregardless of that. It's the important point over here is the nuance of the law, right? Appreciating. It's not so much, oh, now if this happened, it's not remember, this is not about, oh, if this ever happened. Maybe, it didn't happen, such a law. Doesn't matter. It's giving me the parameter of understanding the divine wisdom. Okay? Now, we're looking always for the practicality of it. Not necessarily that is the point. That's, obviously an application of it. If there would, it's important to know what would that mean. But understanding that parameter is very interesting. Okay, one took a handful of flour from a meal offering outside of the temple courtyard and had disqualifying intent with regard to the time and place. The meal offering is to be offered or eaten while taking a handful. The intent is no consequence. Why? Because he took it outside of the temple courtyard. That itself made it disqualified. Although you could always return it, but you had the intent outside. Now you brought it back in, you have the proper intent, it's good. So our mindfulness, I have to actually stop here, but our mindfulness is only good to the fact of what I'm dealing with. So if I have inappropriate mindfulness in a time where whatever I'm doing is disqualified anyways. So my mindfulness doesn't destroy that which is not able to be, my mindfulness kind of giving it an ascent, so to speak, giving it a higher holiness to it, because it's couldn't do it then, right? Altar is broken, so you can't serve on it. You went outside with the meal offering outside of the proper place, even though you could bring it back. But in that moment when I took it out in the wrong place, I had the wrong intent about what I'm going to do with this meal offering, which disqualifies it if it would have been in the right place, but it wasn't. So, which means I can fix that still. Amazing. Okay, I would love to continue, but not able to. All right, we'll see you later, folks.